Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing same album cover, different songs. Okay, so basically, and this is a very rare situation where you have an album which has the same cover, exactly the same cover, or very close to the same cover, but the track listings are different. Now, I'm not talking about albums where the album cover is different, but they have the same songs. That's probably a little bit more common. So, for example, Coney Hatch, the Friction album, I have an example of this. So this is a Friction album. It has this cover, but it also has the slightly more interesting cover, this cover. Okay, so they both look exactly the same on the back, same songs, but they have different album covers. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about same album cover, but you turn it over and the songs are different. Now, most of the best examples actually are examples where it's a compilation album. So here's my first example. This is Masters of Metal. So this is actually a New Zealand release, and it was released on KTEL. So this is the Masters of Metal for New Zealand. But there's also a Masters of Metal. Here's another one. Same, pretty much exactly the same cover. This one's for the UK. Now, you'll see, I guess, the difference is that there's slightly different bands written on it. In fact, Judas Priest is on both, but they're different songs. So, for example, the Judas Priest one for the UK is Deceiver, and for New Zealand, it's the Green Manalishi. So, same band, but different songs, okay? So this is, the New Zealand one also has like a New Zealand band on it. So it's got Nightshade, which is the New Zealand band. And the UK has, Saxon, Bon Jovi, Dio, bands that did not make the New Zealand version of Masters Metal. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure who. They both came out, I think, in 1986. And, I guess for whatever reason, they thought, we're going to release these songs in the UK and we're going to release these songs on the New Zealand compilation version of it. So it's kind of interesting because, you might look at this and see this and think, I've already got it. But actually, if you, like me, and you like compilation albums and, you like to collect these, you probably want to get both because they're both really good compilations with good songs, but all completely different songs. And actually, my New Zealand version says free patch included. Actually comes with this patch. It's kind of cool. So the patches back in the day, you put them on your jean jacket or whatever. So still got that. So that's pretty cool. But so that's my first example. Next one is another compilation, and it's called Kilowatts. So this is a double album. Came out in 1980. It's released on CBS or Epic. And it's interesting too. It's got a bit of a blurb on the back, and it talks about heavy metal's back again. A decade after the first power chord battalions went over the top in a sonic assault on the world's eardrums. Some might say it's returning to its proper place of supremacy in contemporary music, and you won't hear many arguments from me on that score. Exactly why HM and hard rock are back is such an open question that any answer is bound to be unsatisfactory. I rather tend to the argument that it's never really gone away. The fans have always been there. It's just the media that's picking up on it again. So, of course, this is 1980, and they're talking about, by the sounds of it, in 1980, heavy metal had become a little bit less popular, but now it's making a comeback. And I guess with the new wave of British heavy metal, that's probably true. So 1980 compilation. So it's interesting. It's talking about heavy metal and hard rock, but some of the bands on here, I think, on reflection now, we might not really call them heavy metal. I mean, you've got Journey, you've got Aerosmith, Molly Hatchet, REO Speedwagon, So, it's got Judas Priest on here, Blue Oyster Cult, Ted Nugent, but pretty good compilation, 2 LPs. So this is called Kilowatts, came out in 1980, and then this came out in 1983 in Europe, and it's called That's Heavy. So it does have a different title, but as you can see, the covers are identical. And this one, That's Heavy, is not a 2LP, and it features bands, like, it's got 2 songs from Bryan Adams, it's got Rock Goddess, it's got Judas Priest again, Michael Bolton, Loverboy, a couple of Loverboy songs, different back covers talking about some of the bands and their albums. But yeah, they, again, a different country, I guess it's released in a different country, so they thought, well, we can just reuse the album cover again. So they reused the album cover, changed the title, but different songs. And they're both actually really good compilations, I think. So I kind of like having both. But so those are 2 good examples where same album cover, but different tracks on them. Now the next one is another compilation, but it's very similar track listings. And it's one of those examples where I think it's a regional thing. So this is the this is the New Zealand version of Heavy. It's another KTL compilation, and this is the Australian one. So identical covers. The only difference is when you look on the back, there are some different songs. So the New Zealand version has Catch Scratch Fever by Ted Nugent. The Australian one has She Won't Go by Great Dane. I think they're an Australian band. Also, the Australian has Stormy Lady by Southern Cross. New Zealand version has You Can't Stop Rock and Roll by Twisted Sister. And I don't know if there's too many other differences. Oh, actually, the New Zealand version, interestingly enough, has the band Avion and their song Never Let Me Go. Australian version doesn't have the Australian band, which is kind of weird. It has Black Sabbath and Paranoid. So that's a bit strange. You would have thought they would have had... New Zealand ends up with the Australian band, and the Australian version of Heavy doesn't have the Australian band on it, but it does have 2 other Australian bands on it. So I think only about 3 differences as far as songs. So I guess you could argue there's not much difference there, but still a little bit different. So that's compilations. Now I'm just going to show some bands where their album is the same cover but has different track listings. Not completely different, but slightly different. So this one here, and I've shown this before, this is Zed Yago, and this is the American release of their album. So I think because their debut album wasn't released in the States, they used some songs from the debut album on this album, Pilgrimage. So it's got songs like Zed Yago Rocking for the Nation. The first 2 songs are not on the European version. So this is the European version of Pilgrimage. So it's got some slightly different songs on it. It's also got a nice gatefold like this. The US version doesn't have that. So slightly different songs because the debut was released in Europe, they thought, well, we can't reuse those songs again. So they added some different ones. So different songs, not a lot, some of the similar, but some different songs, but same album, title, cover, back cover. But yeah, just again, it's a regional thing. Another interesting one. Now, I don't have both copies of this, but this is Great White and Recovery Live. Now, the one I've got is I think this is the European version. So this was released in 1988, and it's got 1986 live and 1987 at the Marquee Live. But the US version of this album has the same cover, but the US version, I think that was released in 87. That does have 1986 live, but instead of 1987 live, it has some songs from 1983 live. So you don't get the Marquee Live songs. And I guess that makes sense, maybe because it was released in 87 as well. That hadn't even happened, perhaps. But so slightly different versions, but same album covers. Now this one's a complicated one. This is the band called Money. I've showed them before when I was talking about Heavy Metal Records, HM Records label. So this is actually their second album, but it's complicated because all their albums, their first 3 albums are all called Trust Me. Their first 2 albums are called Trust Me. The first 2 albums are called Trust Me, but they have different song titles. Okay? And they have the same album cover. Now, not this album cover, but their first album was called Trust Me, and their second album was called Trust Me, and they had the same album cover, but different songs. The second album then got reissued with a different cover on HM Records. But yeah, so I don't have those. I can't show you that. But yeah, basically the first 2 albums by Money had the same album covers, but different songs, which is really unusual, isn't it? Why would you do that? But that's what they did. Now next one, the band called Craft. Now, this is Second Honeymoon, so this is their second album. But what's interesting is when they released this album in the States, they didn't call it Second Honeymoon, they just called it Craft. They're just self-titled, right? And I'm guessing because they thought maybe they felt they couldn't call it Second Honeymoon, maybe because the first album hadn't been released in the States. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's self-titled, but it's self-titled, and it looks like this, but without no tricks, just kicks written on it. So basically their second album has this cover, but all the songs from Second Honeymoon. Then in Europe, they released their third album with the US cover of the second album. And they just add no tricks, just kicks, but it has completely different songs. So if you have the US version of Kraft's second album, which is just called Self-Titled, you have this cover. And then if you get their third album, it will have this cover as well, but obviously it will have different songs on it, different songs from their second album. So basically you get their second album and their third album can look exactly the same apart from the title, but they will have different songs on them. A little complicated, hopefully you got that. And that's basically it. The only thing I wanted to finish with was, this is probably a little bit, not exactly what the idea of the show, but sometimes bands release albums with covers that look very similar to another album cover. And the best example I could think of was Metallica, the Black Album. So it's pretty much just black. I mean, you can see a little logo snake thing here, and you got the band name very light in the corner there. But of course, this is Spinal Tap, the soundtrack album. That was completely black. And another example I've got here is Bring Me the Horizon. This is That's the Spirit, and it's completely black, but it does have That's the Spirit very lightly written in the middle. So you could argue that's the same, almost the same album cover, but of course different songs because different bands. But so there we go. So that was the theme of today's show. Same album cover, but different songs and some different examples of that. Hope you found that interesting. Maybe there's some that you can think of that I haven't mentioned. If so, please let me know in the comments. Hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you're interested in this type of content. And I'll be back later with some more. All right, we'll catch you later.